Why is it that a single person can occupy so much of your mental space? Why does their name echo in your thoughts like a constant refrain, even when they're not around? Maybe even when they haven't been around in weeks, months, or years. It's not merely about missing someone. It's about the persistent presence of them in your mind, the haunting echo of a memory, a conversation, a look, a silence. And then comes the question that keeps turning over in your chest. If I think about them so much, do they think about me? This is not a trivial question. It's not a whisper of romance or a poetic curiosity. It's a fundamental confrontation between the self and its attachments. You don't think about people for no reason. Something about them, the way they made you feel, the timing of your encounter, the unfinished nature of what happened, lodged itself into your identity. It shaped how you experience your world. The persistence of that thought is not weakness. It's not foolishness. It's the result of something deeply meaningful, emotionally anchored, psychologically embedded. The more unresolved it is, the more persistent it becomes. The mind is not a vacuum. It attaches. It creates meaning. It forms patterns. When someone shows up in your life and activates strong emotional responses, whether joy, pain, hope, or rejection, your mind will naturally gravitate toward that stimulus over and over again. You begin to associate them with parts of yourself you didn't even know existed, and now, even in their absence, they remain present. Not as they are, but as they were. At the most emotionally charged moment you shared, what makes this experience so intense is not just that you remember them, but that your body remembers them. Your nervous system was rewired by the emotional weight they carried into your life. That's what obsession really is. Your psyche trying to solve a riddle that never got a proper answer. Something inside you is trying to make sense of what happened, what was said, what was not said, and what could have been. Now, ask yourself this: if I think about them, do they think about me? It's a tempting question, almost seductive, because we hope that reciprocity exists. We want to believe that what feels powerful inside us also lives somewhere inside them. We want symmetry, balance. We want to believe that if they left a scar in our lives, maybe we left one in theirs. But here's the truth. Thinking about someone is not a shared experience unless it is acted upon. Emotional presence in your own mind is not confirmation of emotional presence in theirs. That's not cynical. That's reality. Sometimes the person you can't stop thinking about hasn't thought of you once. And that's devastating, not because it devalues your thoughts, but because it reveals that your emotional attachment might be internal, private, unshared. But here's the paradox. The fact that you still think about them doesn't mean you're stuck. It means your mind is trying to protect you from abandoning an emotional truth. Something about that person represents a piece of your story that you haven't fully told yourself yet. And that's powerful. When someone lives in your mind, they often symbolize more than just themselves. They represent a dream you had, a version of yourself you became around them, or even the pain you're trying not to feel. The mind keeps returning to the memory because it is still trying to figure out what it means. It keeps rehearsing the scene, hoping to find something new, a new angle, a different interpretation, something to close the loop. But here's the deeper issue. You're not thinking about them. You're thinking about what their absence did to you. You're thinking about the silence they left behind. Or you're thinking about how they awakened something in you and then left before it could make sense. That's not about them anymore. That's about you. That's your own unfinished emotional business. So what do you do with this? How do you move forward when someone is always on your mind? You examine it without judgment, without shame. You get honest with yourself and say, why Does this person still live in my mental space? What did I believe they brought to me that I have not yet found on my own? That question is terrifying, but it is also liberating, because the moment you stop asking, do they think about me, and start asking, why do I still think about them, you shift the power back into your own hands. The real breakthrough happens not when they think of you, but when you no longer need them to. When you realize that your fixation was never about them, it was about something inside you crying out for your attention, longing, hope, identity, worthiness. Once you meet that part of yourself, you no longer beg for closure, you become it. You stop needing them to validate the depth of your emotion. You validate it yourself. Someone being on your mind all the time doesn't always mean love. Sometimes it means unhealed. Sometimes it means unspoken. Sometimes it means unprocessed. And often that person was just a mirror. They showed you what you long for most. They exposed the part of you that still waits to be seen, understood, chosen by you. So if you can't stop thinking about someone, maybe the universe isn't telling you that they're your destiny. Maybe it's telling you to finally return to yourself. When someone keeps appearing in your thoughts, often without warning or invitation, there's something happening beneath the surface that most people don't fully understand. This isn't just sentimentality or coincidence, it's emotional imprinting. The human mind is a pattern-seeking machine. It's designed for survival, for memory, for learning through emotion. So when a person enters your life and causes a disruption in your emotional equilibrium, whether by affection, pain, excitement, or loss, your brain takes note. It doesn't do this rationally, it does it biologically. Neural pathways form, associations become ingrained, and soon their voice, their face, their name isn't just a memory, it's a trigger, an imprint etched into the very architecture of your mind. This process doesn't ask for your permission, it's automatic. That's why it's so difficult to control. You might find yourself replaying moments you had with them without intending to. A random song plays and suddenly you're right back where you were with them. A scent in the air pulls a memory from the back of your mind to the front. It feels like they haunt you, but it's not them. It's the emotional intensity that was connected to them. That's what makes them linger. The stronger the emotion, the deeper the groove it carves into your memory. You can try to resist it, suppress it, distract yourself, but the more you push it down, the more it demands attention, because your mind is wired to resolve what feels unresolved. We are not haunted by people. We are haunted by the emotional stories we created with them that have no conclusion. If someone showed up in your life and ignited something powerful, hope, connection, desire, belonging, your system marks that moment. It becomes part of your emotional narrative. And if that narrative ends abruptly or never quite fulfills itself, your subconscious keeps pulling on it like a thread, hoping to find where it leads. That's why thoughts of them arise, even when you're not consciously seeking them out. Your nervous system is searching for completion, for answers, for integration of the experience. This is not weakness. This is not obsession. This is what it means to be human. The people who leave emotional fingerprints on our lives do so because we were present when they arrived, vulnerable, hopeful, open. And even if they didn't stay, what we felt in their presence had weight. Emotional imprinting occurs when the impact of someone's presence far exceeds the duration of their time in your life. That disproportionate effect is what confuses people. You ask yourself, why do I keep thinking about someone I barely knew, or someone who hurt me, or someone I haven't seen in years? The answer is almost always the same, because what they activated inside you still feels unresolved. Your mind links emotional intensity with meaning. The more something matters to you, the more it embeds itself in your memory. So when someone becomes the focal point of intense emotion, love, heartbreak, rejection, or even inspiration, they become tied to the meaning your mind creates around that emotion. It's not just them you're remembering. It's who you were when you met them. It's what you hoped for, what you feared, what you felt. And this is why healing from someone's impact on your mind is not about forgetting them. It's about understanding the emotional relevance they carried when they arrived in your life. What unmet need did they seem to answer? What internal story did they seem to complete? What belief about yourself did they validate or contradict? Once you understand why they imprinted on your psyche, you gain power, you gain clarity. The grip loosens. You realize that the story isn't about them, it's about you. It always was. It's also important to realize that this imprinting doesn't require a long history or perfect circumstances. Sometimes, even a short encounter can leave a lasting mark if it occurred at a vulnerable point in your life. Maybe you were lonely. Maybe you had just lost someone. Maybe you were seeking direction or reassurance. When a person enters your life at a moment when you're most emotionally open, they don't have to do much to make an impact. The timing alone is enough. The context surrounding the interaction gives it more weight than it objectively deserves. And your mind, ever eager to make sense of things, holds on to it, turns it over, studies it, remembers it. That's the power of emotional imprinting. It doesn't obey time or logic. It obeys emotion. It obeys pattern. You remember what mattered emotionally, not just what made sense. That's why some people stay in your thoughts, not because of who they are now, but because of who they were in the exact moment your heart and mind needed something to hold on to. And this imprinting isn't just about the pain of loss or the high of connection. Sometimes people imprint because they challenged you. They reflected parts of yourself that you hadn't seen before. They mirrored back your desires, your wounds, your dreams, and in doing so, they became more than a person. They became a symbol of potential, of fear, of growth. That symbolism keeps them alive in your inner world long after they've gone from your outer one. The challenge then is not to erase them, but to decode them. To ask yourself, what part of me did they awaken? What part of my story did they step into? And why does that part still feel open-ended? When you can trace the imprint back to its source, you can begin to reclaim it. Not to cut the memory out, but to complete it, to understand it, to find the lesson, the meaning, the truth behind the emotion. Then the thought of them becomes quieter, not gone, but softer, no longer shouting for your attention, but resting in a place of understanding. So when someone is always on your mind, don't shame yourself for it, don't judge it, instead investigate it. Trace the emotional thread back to its root. What you'll often find is that the person is not the source of your fixation. They're the face your mind gave to a deeper need. When you recognize that, you move from being emotionally trapped to being emotionally aware. And awareness is the beginning of release. It's how you move forward, not by forgetting them, but by remembering yourself. Just because you think about someone constantly doesn't mean they're thinking about you. That can be a hard truth to face, especially when your heart feels so deeply entangled in the memory of them. The mind has a way of creating illusions, illusions that comfort us, illusions that trick us into believing there's some form of unseen reciprocity simply because the emotion is so intense. But intensity does not guarantee mutuality. What we feel may be real, but it isn't always shared. Emotional reality is not a two-way mirror. Sometimes it's just you staring at your own reflection, hoping someone is looking back. The human brain craves certainty. It wants answers. It wants resolution. And when it doesn't have those things, it fills in the blanks. So when someone leaves your life abruptly, when they stop calling, stop showing up, stop responding in the way they used to, your mind doesn't accept that silence easily. It resists it. It tries to explain it. And often the explanation it lands on is hope. That maybe they're thinking about you just as much as you're thinking about them. That maybe they feel the same pull. That maybe their silence is not absence, but confusion, hesitation, longing. This imagined mutuality becomes a shield, a way of softening the pain of rejection or abandonment. But it's a shield built on sand. You see, when we think about someone over and over, it creates a loop, a mental cycle that reinforces itself with every passing day. And within that loop, we start to fantasize, not just about the person, but about how they might be thinking of us, missing us, regretting what they did, or longing to return. These fantasies serve a purpose. They give us temporary relief. They allow us to feel significant, even in absence. But that significance is imagined, not confirmed. And that's a dangerous place to live for too long. It's hard to accept that the person you can't stop thinking about might have moved on. It's painful to consider that your presence in their life didn't leave the mark that theirs left in yours. But just because it's painful doesn't mean it isn't true. People experience connection in different ways. What was unforgettable to you may have been a passing moment to them, and that's not because you didn't matter. It's because their emotional framework, their needs, their attachments were different from yours. And it's not your job to mold yourself to fit their capacity for connection. Sometimes you are thinking about them because you're still in the story. You're still processing what happened, what was lost, what could have been. You're still looking for meaning. But they may have closed that chapter in their mind long ago. And that's the imbalance. You're carrying the emotional weight alone, hoping, imagining, believing that somewhere, somehow, they're doing the same. And that belief gives your thoughts purpose. It justifies the obsession. But the truth is, most of the time, if someone is thinking about you, you won't have to wonder. People reach out to what they care about. People return to what they feel drawn to. And if they haven't returned, if they've stayed silent, it often means their thoughts aren't aligned with yours. That doesn't mean your experience was meaningless. It means that meaning is not always shared equally. One person's transformative moment can be another person's passing distraction. And when that happens, it doesn't make you weak for caring more. It makes you human. The pain comes not just from the loss itself, but from the realization that the emotional connection wasn't mutual. And yet, the longer you hold on to the belief that they must be thinking about you too, the longer you delay your own healing. You wait for a sign, a message, a moment of acknowledgement. And in that waiting, you hand your power away. You suspend your life for the possibility of theirs intersecting with it again. The mind clings to imagined reciprocity because it fears irrelevance. It fears that all this emotion, all this thought, all this pain was one-sided. But sometimes it is, and that's a truth you must learn to hold without letting it destroy you. One-sided love, one-sided longing, one-sided memory. They're painful, yes, but they're also proof of your depth, proof of your emotional integrity. You gave something real, you felt something true, and whether or not it was returned, that truth remains valid. It says more about your capacity to feel than it does about their absence. And so the work is not to convince yourself that they're thinking about you. The work is to understand why you need them to be. Why does their imagined attention feel so necessary to you? What hole does it fill? What story does it preserve? Often, we don't want them to think about us because we want them back. We want them to think about us so we don't feel discarded. We want to feel that we mattered, that we weren't invisible, that our emotions weren't wasted. But those are questions you must answer within yourself. No one else can validate your worth. No one else can confirm your significance, especially not someone who has chosen to remain silent. When you stop searching for signs, when you stop projecting your thoughts into their head, you create space for something far more important: your own clarity. You begin to see that your thoughts about them are not indicators of a cosmic connection. They are signals of your own unfinished healing. The loop exists because the story hasn't been resolved in your mind. You're still waiting for a conclusion that may never come. But you can write your own ending. You can release the belief that they must be thinking about you in order for what you felt to be real. The real question is not, do they think about me? The real question is, why does it matter so much if they do? That question will lead you to your own heart. It will lead you to the wound beneath the longing. And when you confront that wound, when you finally sit with it and stop running from it through imagined reciprocity, you begin to heal. You begin to reclaim the thoughts that were once dominated by their presence. You begin to remember yourself. And that's the beginning of freedom. Not when they come back, not when they reach out, but when you no longer need them to. Because your thoughts are no longer trying to chase after someone else's. They're grounded in your own truth, your own journey, your own becoming. When a person stays on your mind, often relentlessly and without clear invitation, what you're experiencing is not necessarily love, longing, or connection. It's often unfinished emotional business. The mind does not tolerate incompletion. It seeks resolution like the body seeks air. When something emotionally significant happens, especially something that ends abruptly, unfairly, or without clarity, the psyche registers it as open, and the more emotionally charged the event or person, the louder the unfinished business echoes in your mind. You may believe that you're thinking about the person because they're your soulmate, your perfect match, or the one who got away. But often, the truth is more nuanced, even painful. You're thinking about them because something remains unresolved within you. You're trying to finish a sentence that never got a period. We are not just creatures of logic, we are creatures of narrative. Every interaction we have gets shaped into a story in our minds. Who we were, who they were, what it meant. And when that story gets interrupted, when it doesn't unfold the way our heart hoped or our mind expected, we don't simply let it go. Instead, we replay it, rewrite it, reimagine it, trying to fix it in memory, trying to extract meaning from the fragments. That's the origin of the obsession. It's not really about them. It's about your brain seeking emotional closure. The problem is, many people try to suppress this process. They shame themselves for still thinking about someone who left, who ghosted them, who betrayed them, who didn't reciprocate. They call themselves weak, dramatic, broken. But the mind isn't broken for clinging to what hurt. It's functioning exactly as it was designed. Emotional wounds require attention. They demand understanding. If someone came into your life and sparked something intense, whether joy or devastation, that moment becomes an imprint. And if it ended before your psyche was ready, if you never got to speak your truth or fully process the meaning, your brain will keep looping the moment like a skipping record, asking, what happened? Why? What does this say about me? Unfinished emotional business is not just about conversations left unsaid. It's also about unmet needs, unanswered questions, and unvalidated experiences. Maybe they hurt you and you never got to express the depth of that pain. Maybe you loved them and they never acknowledged it. Maybe they changed suddenly and you never understood why. That lack of closure creates a vacuum, and your mind tries to fill it with what-ifs, fantasies, and imagined dialogues. It's not romantic, it's survival. Your brain is attempting to restore psychological balance, to make sense of the emotional chaos. This is why time alone doesn't heal. Time only creates distance. What heals is understanding. What heals is facing the emotional gap and deciding to close it. Not through their words or actions, but through your own inner work. When you say to yourself, I may never get an apology, I may never get clarity, I may never understand why they did what they did, and then you choose to move forward anyway, that is healing. That is resolution. That is how the mind finally begins to release its grip. Sometimes you don't need to hear from them to heal. You need to hear from yourself. You need to sit with the pain, not to indulge it, but to understand it. You need to trace the longing back to its origin. Maybe you weren't just missing them. You were missing the way they made you feel, seen, desired, valued. Maybe they awakened something inside of you you hadn't felt in years. Hope, excitement, possibility. Or maybe, deep down, you're afraid that no one else will awaken that again. That fear, more than anything, keeps them alive in your thoughts. Because if they were the only source of that feeling, then losing them feels like losing a piece of yourself. But no one is the sole gatekeeper of your emotional aliveness. What they awaken in you didn't come from them, it came from you. They simply mirrored it, reflected it, activated it. And once you understand that, you begin to see that what you miss isn't really them, it's the version of you that came alive in their presence. And that version of you still exists, still breathes, still has value, but it's waiting for you to recognize it again without attaching it to someone else's validation. Unfinished emotional business also stems from identity disruption. When a person enters your life and then leaves suddenly, you don't just lose them, you lose the version of yourself you were becoming with them. You lose the imagined future, the emotional investment, the identity that was beginning to form around that relationship. And that disorientation can feel like grief, because it is. You grieving not only a person, but a potential, a narrative that ended before its climax. And the mind, desperate for meaning, tries to resurrect it, relive it, restore it, until it makes peace with its end. So the work here is difficult, but essential. You must be willing to feel what you've tried to avoid, to grieve what you never gave yourself permission to grieve. Not just the person, but the pieces of you that feel lost in their absence. You must become curious about your thoughts instead of condemning them. Why does this memory keep surfacing? What emotion is still tethered to this person? What belief about myself am I unconsciously attaching to their departure? Maybe it's the belief that you're not enough, that if they had stayed, it would have proven your worth. Maybe it's the fear that love isn't safe, because every time you open your heart, someone leaves. These beliefs, more than the person, are what fuel the thoughts. They keep you psychologically entangled because they haven't been challenged. And once you challenge them, once you dismantle the false narratives that their absence seemed to confirm, you begin to sever the emotional bond, not by forgetting, but by releasing. This is the path forward. Not through repression, not through fantasy, not through waiting for them to return, but through completion. You finish the story on your own terms. You decide what the experience meant. You choose what you carry and what you leave behind. And in doing so, you reclaim your power. Not by erasing the past, but by rewriting the meaning of it. That's how you free yourself from the thoughts that won't let go. That's how you turn unfinished emotional business into a finished chapter in your story. What often keeps someone living rent-free in your mind isn't love or desire. It's the attachment your mind formed to what they represented. That person may have entered your life at a moment when you were vulnerable, lonely, hopeful, or searching for direction, and in that space of openness, they became more than a person. They became a symbol of healing, of possibility, of the life you wanted to believe you could have. When someone becomes a symbol, they take on weight far greater than their actual behavior ever justified. You're not just thinking about them. You're clinging to what they symbolized in your internal world. And that's why the attachment feels so hard to break, because it's not really about them. It's about what they awakened in you. This symbolic attachment can happen in many ways. Maybe they made you feel safe when your world was in chaos. Maybe they showed you a glimpse of connection you hadn't experienced in years. Maybe they made you feel chosen, seen, or special in ways that touched old hidden wounds. And now, even if they're gone, the mind keeps holding on. Not to them as they are, but to them as what they meant. That emotional imprint is powerful. It keeps the person alive in your thoughts, because letting them go would feel like letting go of a version of you that only existed with them. And that's what makes detachment feel so terrifying. But here's the truth. When someone becomes a symbol, they are no longer being seen clearly. They are being projected onto. Your mind starts to overlook their flaws, ignore their distance, rationalize their mistreatment, all because it's trying to preserve the emotional meaning it has attached to them. It's not that they were perfect, it's that your mind needed them to be. You elevated them to represent something sacred: hope, healing, passion, purpose. And so letting go of them feels like betraying something larger. That's why you stay stuck. That's why their presence keeps echoing in your mind long after they've left. And yet, clarity only comes when you separate the person from the projection. You have to be willing to ask yourself, am I in love with who they truly were, or am I in love with what I wanted them to be? That question can unravel everything. Because in so many cases, we fall in love with potential. We fall in love with fantasy. We fall in love with how someone made us feel in a fleeting moment of attention, not with the consistent reality of who they were. If they truly valued you, if they were emotionally available, if they were committed to your well-being, would you be here now, caught in cycles of wondering, waiting, and wishing, or would you be building something real together? The person on your mind may not even be someone who was good to you. And that's another layer of complexity. We tend to believe that the ones we can't forget must have been deeply special or uniquely compatible with us. But sometimes the intensity of our thoughts comes from unresolved trauma bonds, not genuine compatibility. Sometimes the person who is hardest to forget is the one who triggered your deepest fears and wounds. Fear of abandonment, fear of being unseen, fear of not being enough. And your thoughts obsessively return to them because your mind is trying to fix the narrative. It wants to resolve the wound by replaying the scene, imagining a different ending, a moment of validation that never came. It keeps chasing closure where none was given. And the dangerous part is this mental chasing can feel a lot like love. But it isn't. Love is not built on uncertainty and confusion. It is not sustained by silence and absence. Obsession isn't proof of connection. It's proof of emotional entanglement. And until you recognize the difference, your thoughts will remain enslaved to a person who may no longer even remember the weight of what they once meant to you. So how do you let go of someone who has become a symbol in your life? You start by separating the emotional truth from the emotional attachment. What did they actually give you? Not what you imagined, but what they truly offered. Did they show up for you? Were they honest with you? Did they nurture your growth, respect your boundaries, contribute to your peace? Or did you fill in those blanks with your longing, your dreams, your unmet needs? You must allow yourself to grieve not just the person, but the idea of them. the version of yourself you saw when you were with them. Grief is not weakness. It is evidence that you invested deeply, that you allowed yourself to feel. And that feeling is not something to be ashamed of. It is something to be honored. But grief must be moved through, not clung to. You cannot build your future on the ruins of an illusion. Letting go also means reclaiming what they awakened in you. If they made you feel desired, then the truth is desire still exists within you. If they inspired you, then the potential for inspiration still lives in you. If they made you dream, then the dream did not die with them. It was yours first. It came from your heart, not theirs. And you are allowed to keep that dream, even if they are no longer a part of it. The person who lives in your mind may have started as someone real, but over time they became someone else. An idea, a fixation, a symbol of everything you wanted to feel. And now your task is to bring that symbol back down to reality, to look at them as they are, not as your heart wished them to be. Only then can you begin to free your mind from their grip. Only then can you reclaim the energy you've poured into fantasizing, waiting, or hoping. You were not wrong for caring. You were not foolish for believing. You were simply human, longing for connection, safety, and meaning. But now you have to give yourself permission to find those things elsewhere, to no longer tie them to a person who cannot or will not show up for you. The real power lies not in getting them back, but in seeing clearly why you held on, and then choosing with courage and compassion to let go, not because it didn't matter, but because you finally do.